Okay, so Philadelphia's loading up on all these Georgia players. What around the league, what do people make of that?
I think around the league, people see Philly taking a lot of swings. I mean, Jalen Carter was a guy that was off some teams' boards, and I think if you look at like the history of these sorts of picks, there is some bust. Like Seattle, for example, Pete Carroll really liked him, but John Schneider had been marked by the experience going through the Malik McDowell situation, so it was sort of became a non-starter for them. So they take a swing there. They take a swing with Keely Ringo later in the draft. They take a swing on an undrafted free agent named Eli Ricks. You sort of see a team that's operating like one that feels like it's really close, which it should because they're in the Super Bowl. And you sort of wonder how some of these risks are going to pan out. And really what they're betting on there, Colin, is the infrastructure, right? That they've got a veteran locker room, that they've got some of his old friends from Georgia and Jordan Davis and Nakobe Dean already in the program. And they're hoping that they've got enough around him, coaching, locker room, scheme, all that stuff to get him on the right path and get the other guys on the right path too. But they certainly took a lot of risk throughout the draft and throughout the weekend. There's no question about that.
So I think ultimately Tennessee could have been perfect for Will Levis. A Southern kid can stay close to home. They have a run game. People are dying to watch the backup because everybody's about done with Ryan Tannehill. So I think it's a perfect place for him. Were you surprised that he slid all the way to the second? Quarterbacks slide. They usually don't slide to the second.
This is one of the weirder, I would say one of the weirder months for a single draft prospect that I can remember because, I mean, for a good 2-3 weeks there, Colin, it felt like he was sinking like a stone. Like he wasn't interviewing well with teams. Teams weren't impressed with his combine workout. They didn't feel like he did great at his pro day. It was like he's going to slide, he's going to slide, he's going to slide. And then about 10 days before the draft, all of a sudden, it's like someone put their foot in the ground and turned it in the other direction, And now all of a sudden it was Levis to the Colts. Could Levis go as high as second overall? And there was more positive out there on him. There was the connection to the Mannings, of course, and the idea that he had done well at the Manning Passing Academy the summer before. And so I think, it's like a lot of other things during the draft. You get closer to the draft and some of the information can conflict. And sometimes what you had first was the truth. And I think that's sort of what the case was here, where the league looked at him a certain way through March and most of April. And then in the end, there was, an effort to restore his stock based on all the things that had gone wrong over the 6 or 7 weeks previous. And the reality was that it wasn't enough to help him on Thursday night. Now, I do think he's going to a good place. It may help him that he's a second-round pick. And, I certainly think he has a head coach in Mike Vrabel who, A, likes him and B, won't rush him out onto the field. But I think where he went is sort of reflective of how the league saw him over the course of the last 6 or 7 weeks.
So Bryce Young, Carolina knew what? For a month they were going to take him. Was this pretty unanimous in the building, right?
Well, it goes back to when they made the trade. And I talked to Scott Fitter about this over the weekend. And, his first experience was actually sitting with his wife and watching the Heisman ceremony a year and a half ago and how impressed they were with how he came off. And then they start to study him on tape. And, what they see is a guy who, processes, who plays the game in an NFL way, who wins from the pocket, who leads, whose intangibles are off the charts, who, you hear from people who are at Alabama, it was the most prepared person in the building and challenged the coaches to be more prepared. And so, the scouts and the coaches at Carolina knew all of this when they traded for Bryce Young or when they traded for the number 1 overall pick. And so Bryce became their baseline, but they wanted to go through a full process and they wanted to give CJ Stroud and Anthony Richardson and Will Levis a full opportunity to catch Bryce Young. And if one of them or two of them did it, maybe they would have considered trading down. And I think the real tell was a couple of weeks ago inside that building when it became clear that they weren't going to move off the first overall pick. And that's when it sort of clued people therein to the fact that Scott Fitter and Frank Reich had settled on Bryce Young as the first overall pick. They really formalized it a week ago today when Fitter walked into Reich's office and flat out asked him, okay, who is it? And Reich said, yeah, it's Bryce. But I think that feeling had been in the building for a while. And really over the last couple of weeks, when the idea of trading the pack down melted away, everybody knew what was going on.
So it was very clear, Aaron Rodgers, honeymoon phase, Rangers, Knicks. What is your takeaway on, it's more of a lease. There was a deeply embedded relationship in Green Bay. He had leverage, and so it was a hard 2-3 year divorce. It was like any long, both had a lot invested. New York's a lease. It's dating. Like, if it doesn't work after a year, they're done. New York's not going to sit around and wait for Aaron Rodgers to be in the right mood. What are you hearing so far?
Well, Colin, doesn't this feel like someone's ex going on Instagram? You know what I mean? He's all over the place now. He's at Knicks games. He's at Rangers games. I think that this is indicative of where Aaron Rodgers is right now. And I think he's going to give the Jets a new level of engagement. And that's what he intimated to them when they went out to California to meet with him. Like, they knew he was going to be a part of their offseason program. It was important to them. And they knew that there was a good chance that he was going to play not 1, but 2 years there. They felt like, from having talked to him, that he was really energized. And in the same way that Tom Brady was energized when he went to Tampa, the same way Peyton Manning was energized when he went to Denver, the same way Brett Favre was energized when he went to Minnesota with something to prove. And so I think they're going to get a very engaged Aaron Rodgers. And it's interesting, too, because you look back at last year, and that was one of the issues the Packers had with him was, they drafted these young receivers to replace Devontae Adams and Romeo Doubs and Christian Watson. And they felt like, those guys really could have used Aaron Rodgers in the building in May and June. And maybe one of the reasons why those guys didn't come on until November and December was because they lost that time at the very beginning of the process. So I think the Packers feel like they were never going to get that level of engagement from Rodgers. And it was probably going to take a change of scenery to get that out of him. And sure enough, here we are, and he's giving that level of engagement to the Jets.
So is there a team? It's hard to grade. I always do this. On Monday after the draft, I take your free agent signings and your top 3 picks. I feel like there's certainty. And I thought Houston, between free agency and Dalton Schultz, Shaq Mason, and Robert Woods and their top 2 or 3 picks, I'm like, that could be a better football team. They could be reasonably viable. Is there a team that underwhelmed to you over the course of Thursday through Sunday?
I think what a lot of people would say is Detroit, and I actually liked what they did. So I go the other way on that because people look at positional value with Jahmyr Gibbs and Jack Campbell as an off-ball linebacker, but they were going to take Gibbs at 6. And I thought it was a good rebound for them. The guy they wanted was Devin Witherspoon. Now he goes 5 to Seattle. So instead of just taking Gibbs at 6, they move back. And so with those 2 picks, they wind up with Gibbs, Campbell, and then Sam Laporta, the tight end from Iowa, there at the top of the second round. The one team, I just look at what they did, and I think they're looking a year ahead, and it kind of just maybe bothers me a little bit based on where they are. And far be it for me to ever criticize Tom Telesco because he's put together a hell of a roster there, and he's probably right about a lot of these guys based on his track record. But I just sort of feel like they were working a year ahead with the pass rusher from USC, with the off-ball linebacker from Washington State, and then with Quentin Johnston in the first round. Are they looking at potentially maybe Keenan Allen isn't on the team a year from now? Maybe Kenneth Murray's gone. Maybe Khalil Mack's gone. It just sort of felt like they were working a year ahead, which a lot of good teams do. But I just sort of look at the spot that they're in, Colin, right now with Justin Herbert still on manageable cap numbers and a lot of guys in the prime in the roster. And you sort of look at it and say, could they have used a Jordan Addison who might have complemented Mike Williams and Keenan Allen a little better in the here and now?
Yeah.
Could they have used a Dalton Kincaid who would have brought a little something different to the table? That would be my one thing. It's just looking at the Chargers draft. I like the players they took. I just wonder if it fits for a team that I think is in a position to win in the here and the now.
Yeah. All right. For the record, Lamar got all as unorthodox and noisy as it was. OBJ, Flowers, Lamar, feisty. You wake up this morning. J-Mac and I think the Steelers had a really good draft. So do I. I think the Steelers crushed it. Yep. I mean, they got a tackle, a blocking tight end,
a left tackle,
a starting, corner and Porter. That's a good team that just got 3 or 4 starters. What do you tell me what Baltimore surprised it got done this weekend?
You mean the contract?
Lamar, yeah.
The Lamar contract, yeah. I would say this was eventually going to get done. And I think to some degree the Jalen Hurts deal helped push things along, as did the draft coming, because I think there was a feeling that if there was ever going to be a checkpoint when things were going to change and him getting signed to an offer sheet from another team, well, then it would probably happen after the draft when you're talking about dealing 24 and 25 picks instead of dealing 23 and 24 picks. And, I just think Lamar kind of came to the realization that interest that hadn't come through March and April probably wasn't going to come in May. And then the Jalen Hurts deal comes down the pike, and it's sort of the same way it worked 5 years ago, where the Kirk Cousins deal happened. And everybody was like, all right, this is it. Fully guaranteed contracts are coming. And then Matt Ryan does a deal. And then, Aaron Rodgers does a deal. And Jared Goff and Carson Wentz do deals. And those deals are all traditional quarterback structure, which leaves the Cousins deal there as an outlier. And it's sort of the same thing here. Deshaun Watson does his deal last year. Well, since then, we've seen Kyler Murray and Russell Wilson and Jalen Hurts all do deals that were of traditional quarterback structure. And so, Watson, the same way Cousins' deal became the outlier, not the trendsetter. And so I think those two things combined helped Lamar get to the point where, he was able to say, you know what, this may not be good for all players, and I may not be getting the trend-setting contract that I wanted to, but this is just the way it is in the NFL right now, and I better take this amount of money while I can get it.
Yeah. All right, Albert Breer, great seeing you as always. Monday Morning Quarterback. Thanks, man. Hi, everybody. Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from The Herd or go watch a few segments from other shows on FS1.